control freaks that are running things have a code. They have to give us clues about the evil things they've done or plan to do. If we don't figure it out and do something about it, they figure we deserve what we get. Leading up to September 11th, 2001, the date, the numbers 9 and 11, were foreshadowed many times in the media by these people, appearing on clocks, dials, dates on paperwork, and countless other ways. Here we'll look at just some of the analog clocks with the hands either directly or almost directly pointing to 9 and 11, or pointing to 11 minutes past 9, that were purposely shown in movies and on television between 1978 and 2001. At the end, you'll see a clock that will tie the events of 9/11 in with the person who was the main driving force behind what happened on that day. He's also one of the only people on the planet who actually had the means to arrange all the foreshadowing before the crime and the motive to carry it out. And it's not this guy. Superman, released 23 years before the crime in 1978. The clock behind Clark Kent shows the time just before 9:11 a.m. Another clip from Superman, 1978, entirely different day in the movie, clock hands pointing to exactly 11 minutes past 9. Trading Places, 1983, the clock on the wall has its hands pointing at 9 and 11. Twilight Zone, the movie, 1983. The clock with the spinning hands in the opening credits shows 9 and 11 on the dial right before it flies off the screen. Rambo 2, 1985. Clock behind two men in the movie shows 9 and 11. Mannequin from 1987. Clock behind the actors shows 11 minutes past 9. Awakenings from 1990. Clock behind those bars has the hands set closest to 9 and 11. Same movie, Awakenings, different clock, 11 minutes after 9. The Fisher King from 1991. Camera pans up to a clock on the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower in Manhattan, hands at 9 and 11. The Distinguished Gentleman from 1992, 11 minutes after 9. Same movie, different clock, same time, 11 minutes after 9. The Paper from 1994. Man looks at his watch and the hands are at 9 and 11 on the dial. LA Confidential from 1997. Clock on the wall clearly shows 9 and 11. X-Files episode called Max from 1997. Camera shows a watch with the hands closest to 9 and 11. Another X-Files episode entitled Synchrony from the same year. Very clear shot of a clock shows 9 and 11. Godzilla, 1998. Man looks at his watch, hands are at 9 and 11. The 13th Floor from 1999. Clock on the wall has the minute hand closest to 9 and the hour hand closest to 11. Another X-Files episode called NME. Hour hand closest to 9 and minute hand closest to 11. Maze, movie from 2000. Camera shows a night table with two clocks. The analog clock clearly shows 11 minutes past 9. Someone Like You, released in 2001. Clock hands pointing to 9 and 11. This next to last clock is in the background of a commercial that played on television the morning of 9/11 at 8:46 a.m., the same moment that the attacks on the towers began. It's an Entenmann's advertisement starring Whoopi Goldberg. Notice the time on the clock behind her. Meanwhile, in New York, here's the last 9/11 clock in this series, and the most important. You're about to see a scan of a Newsweek magazine. The cover picture is of a man sitting in an office window, his watch prominently displayed. When the watch is flipped over to the way that the man would see it when it's on his arm, hands are pointing directly at 9 and 11. The second hand is even positioned exactly at the 11 mark on the dial. Here's a close-up of that watch. What separates this foreshadowing from the rest is the fact that this magazine is from back in April of 1967, less than 1 year after the construction of the World Trade Center towers began. And the man wearing the watch is the person who made sure they got built. His name, David Rockefeller.
The two of you, when you were a leader, had chased Manhattan, and he was governor. were responsible for really the World Trade Center?
We worked together on that.
Lower Manhattan was deteriorating, and a radical plan for its revitalization was championed by David Rockefeller and his brother Nelson, then governor of New York. With Mayor John Lindsay on board, they set out to build a trade center, the likes of which the world had never seen, and on a shocking scale. 2 110-story towers.
Here is David today. David is proud of being part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States. He brags about this on page 405 of his 2002 autobiography entitled Memoirs. He was also quoted prior to 9/11 as saying, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis. And the nations will accept the New World Order." If you know anything about the New World Order, you'll understand why this is a big problem for a huge percentage of the people on this planet. Since they became obscenely wealthy back in the 1800s, David's family has been using their immense, ill-gotten fortune to take over literally every aspect of our lives as Americans. Our education and medical systems, our economy, and our media. These people love war, murder, corruption, oppression, and, if the right major crisis does not occur, they'll create it to further their agenda. And, as in the case of the time between the building and demolition of the World Trade Center, they can wait a very long time for their plans to come to fruition. Why would he show himself on the cover of a magazine with his watch hands set at 9 and 11 and make sure so many clocks show 9 and 11 in the movies and on television? It's all part of their code, and so far, they must think we're too dumb to notice. So remember who made sure those towers got built, 110 stories and a height of over 1,300 feet each. Enormous open floors that a fire could easily sweep across, and substandard fireproofing. No fire escapes and no automated sprinklers. And the next time someone tries to tell you that this guy and these guys committed the acts of 9/11 and brought us the Patriot Act, the NDAA, and the bogus war on terror and the encroaching police state, remember the man who brought us the towering death traps, the same man who is proud to be fighting against the United States and what we stand for. And remember that this same person actually had the motive, the means to pull it off, and the ability to arrange all the clues you've seen here. Especially this one. Also remember that this person has gotten away with it, for now.
I'm glad
And now, a reading from Memoirs by David Rockefeller. Actually, I can't read from it yet because I just behold his greatness. Look at that. He's like, I will not even look directly into the camera. I am too good for that. I will only let you profile me. Behold my tie. It is worth more than your children. I am glorious. Ugh. Okay. I came across this quote, and I know I'm late to the game as usual, but it's still sinking in for me, as I'm sure it did for many of you when you read it. Okay. This is from a section called Proud Internationalist, under the heading Populist Paranoia. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents such as my encounter with Castro to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as, quote, internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. And he's saying that as if it's a joke, or as if these people are crazy for thinking that, even though quite obviously that's entirely what's going on for multiple reasons. Actually, this is a quote from a book called Hell of a Town, The Story of New York City During World War II. Let's just read this for a second. This has to do with the $8.5 million that the Rockefeller family paid for the land that would become the United Nations headquarters. And it says the deal was completed on December 11th, 1946, reportedly at Zeckendorf's unofficial offices in the Monte Carlo nightclub. Zeckendorf was the guy who owned the land. When the architect Wallace Harrison, the planning director for the UN building, signed the final papers, he telephoned Nelson Rockefeller at his Rockefeller Center office with the news, and Rockefeller shouted into the phone, "Wally, that calls for a celebration. See if you can't bring back a bottle of champagne." Harrison went to a liquor store for something worthy of the occasion, and in his wallet he had the executed papers for the $8.5 million deal and two $1 bills for the champagne. So they bought the land the United Nations headquarters ended up being founded on. And then you've got this book here. This is the Rockefeller Panel Reports. And this was published, I think, in 59. This copy was 61. But there's all kinds of stuff about how the United Nations is our best hope for world peace. It's the best thing we've got. I'm just going to read a couple because the sections go on and on and on. But here's one. And this is actually in a section called The Growth of Community that has to do with the America's economy. And so before I read this, actually, let's go back to his quote again real quick. He says, "Some believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States." And he's talking about how they want to build more integrated global political and economic structure. And then you've got these Rockefeller panel reports where they straight up say that the United Nations plays a vitally important role in the development of a functioning international system, the United Nations that they helped build. And then this whole thing talks about that. And over here it says, the UN stands finally as a symbol of the world order that will one day be built. So that was the whole plan for the United Nations, as a world order. And actually later in this book, they actually call it a new world order. I believe that's on page 72. And it says, America's own interest in the role it is called upon to play in all parts of the world require it to work toward the removal of race and color as significant factors, quote, in a new world order. And going back to his beautiful visage, going back to his memoirs, just such a stunning, beautiful man. You're missing out. Look. Yes, I'm posed from the side. I just can't get over that. Such a smarmy picture. Okay, anyway. Do you like that? I'm not cynical. I've just been taking notes. History book. Anyway. It's pretty accurate. Let's see if I can get back to the page I was on. I think it was 407. If you go back to this chapter, proud internationalist here. So he says this. He says, well, if that's a charge, I'm guilty, right? But then you go through and look at some of the other headers in this chapter. You've got the Council on Foreign Relations. You've got Bilderberg. Oh, this is really good. Underneath Bilderberg it says, if the Council on Foreign Relations raises the hackles of conspiracy theorists, the Bilderberg meetings must induce apocalyptic visions of omnipotent international bankers plotting with unscrupulous government officials to impose cunning schemes on an ignorant and unsuspecting world. He says it like it's supposed to be a joke. That's actually what's going on. Anyway, you've got consorting with reactionaries. Where he's talking about how he was in other groups, not just the Bilderberg group, furthering international cooperation. Well, they're all about that. Oh, there's Kissinger's name. He's in everything. Fighting protectionism. Let's see what else. The Trilateral Commission. So that's good.
Hold on. He founded that group, by the way. Go ahead.
Didn't they found a lot? I mean, not Bilderberg, but didn't they found the Council on Foreign Relations too?
Pretty much, yeah.
Weren't they behind the League of Nations too?
They're deeply involved in this whole 20th century deal.
Like everything. What else? Do we have anything else in here?
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to wonder if they're really involved in, quote, conspiracies on the international level, all you have to do is go to the admission after the smarmy paragraph you pointed out about Bilderberg, about how it gives people apocalyptic visions. Read about, well, is Bilderberg involved in insider trading? Are they involved in scheming? Do they plan things at their meetings? In 1976, Bilderberg faced a scandal that almost resulted in its collapse. In that year, in testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, it was alleged that Prince Bernhard, that's the founder of Bilderberg and the Prince of the Netherlands, Prince Bernhard had approached the Lockheed Corporation with an offer to use his position to influence the Dutch defense procurement policies in return for significant financial consideration. As the year wore on, the evidence against Bernhard accumulated, including indications he had met with intermediaries during Bilderberg events. The 1976 conference was canceled, and it appeared for a time that Bilderberg was finished. But Bilderberg's not involved in plotting anything. They're just there doing stuff. And here they are talking about the reactionaries and some Italian groups. But on the next page, where they talk about trade barriers and protectionism, they're talking about their role in GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. They're also involved in the World Trade Organization, NAFTA, you name it. Pretty much all these different agreements.
After he makes this joke in this book, it's most of the way through the book, as you can see. But there's another chapter earlier on called Creating a Global Bank.
Wow.
So he's sitting here making jokes about how he's not in on some, their family isn't in on some big charge for an integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. The earlier chapter is called Creating a Global Bank.
Yeah, there's another part in this book, I wasn't prepared to flip to it, but during his Chase Manhattan days, he bragged about knowing every single leader, every last one in Latin America, which is South America, Central America, all the leaders of all those countries, which, by the way, all underwent coups and revolutions at the hand of the CIA, and you name it. These guys have their thumbs in the pie of everything going on in the 20th century on a global scale, and they're arrogantly bragging about it in the memoirs.
He's got his glass, and he's like, yes, I'm plotting, yeah. He's got that horrible look, too. Don't look at my face. Only look at me from the side. You will only see 50% of my beautiful man visage. Ugh.
97 years old.
I kind of think I threw up in my mouth a little. Yeah, I might want to brush my teeth.
The elite, however, occasionally have a difficult time ruling themselves. At a 1991 closed-door meeting of fellow internationalists, billionaire and former CFR chairman David Rockefeller praised his media allies, but his confidence that his words would not leave the room was later broken.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
Redirecting the bright lights of publicity is not the media's only contribution toward such a plan.